Hi everyone, on today's episode of the Devon Messinger Show, we're going to be taking a mini recap of the season so far for the Longhorns following the recent loss to Florida in Gainesville. Longhorns fans, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. It's greatly appreciated, and check us out at HornSports.com for all the latest in Texas news. I thought it would be good to do a little look at where the team is after that loss to Florida. Of course, the 29 to 21 loss in Gainesville. And honestly, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to start just right ahead and start with the bad. I got the notepad out, which means you got some numbers and some bad things coming. You got to start with the offensive line against the Gators in Florida. I know that Florida was a 1-3 team, but I did talk about it in my preview and prediction. Now, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to say I got the pick wrong, and I was quite off. I had Texas winning by more than the spread, and of course, they ended up dropping by 8 points. And you got to look where it starts. Offensive line again. Florida, 1-3, but they're an athletic team. There's a reason I had such a high danger level. Let's flip to last week's pick. Last week, I had Texas winning 24-13, of course, dropped by 8 points, but I had the danger level at an 8. In part, I said because it's a road game and you could tell the swamp was rocking. I think everyone that was there, especially all my friends that reported back, said it's the real deal in Florida, and kudos to them. So the swamp, of course, a real factor, but also this Gators team is an athletic bunch. Even though they've lost 3 games, they did lose to 2 pretty solid programs, being Miami and LSU, and of course USF, not the greatest of losses as well, but not a terrible team either. Now, they've lost a couple of games, but looking to bounce back, looking to not fire Coach Napier, which I know Florida fans are, on the edge of their seat about whether he stays or goes. Some like it, some don't. But, again, this Florida team is athletic, like the Longhorns. But I've mentioned it week in and week out, even in some of these, easier quote-unquote games against UTEP, against Sam Houston, San Jose State. The offensive line for the Longhorns has not looked great or as good as they should. Even in those smaller games, you weren't seeing the push that you'd expect against some of those smaller teams in the pocket. And I know Arch Manning has been inconsistent, but I also talked about the pocket has not been a consistent one for him. Against Florida, a team that sacked the opposing quarterback, a total of 3 times entering the Texas game, sacked Arch Manning, wait for it, 6 times this past Saturday. 6 times. And honestly was pressured for most of his dropbacks, period. Of course, that's just in the passing game itself, but also in the running game. Not pretty at all for the Longhorns. Of course, going back to the offensive line, not getting the push up front, which in the SEC, guys, everyone is talented. Everyone is physical. Is athletic. You got to win the battle of the trenches, and they did not do that. Texas running backs averaged just really nothing on the ground. A total of 15 yards, period, for the game. There's no point in saying averages. They ran for 15 yards. Quintravion Wisner and Ryan Niblett, those are the 2 backs that added anything in the ground game. But again, not much, and a large part of that is just because of the lack of a push up front. And I got to quote Pitbull here, guys. I wrote it down to make sure I'm not getting it wrong, but I think we all know the quote. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. It's on my notepad. Pitbull. That's been the problem for Longhorns in recent history, in recent memory. In losses dating back to last year, they just have not been able to run the ball successfully. Now, of course, the passing game has also been inconsistent in many of these contests as well, but you have to also remember that the running game typically sets up the passing game. If you can establish a running game, the passing lanes just open up wide. Now, against Florida, again, as I mentioned, only had 15 yards from the running backs. They did have a total of 52 rushing yards, period. But I'm going to date back here, okay? So this past Saturday, 52 total rushing yards, mostly from Arch Manning. Now, you look back to the season opener against Ohio State, in which the Longhorns scored 7 points. Now, this is going to be the anomaly, so to speak, here. This was the passing game that just was not going together, and again, Arch shoulders much of the blame there. The running attack for Longhorns did attribute to 166 yards of total offense. That is much more solid. That is a number you need to see in wins. Of course, they dropped that first game, but you look back then against Ohio State in the playoff last year, only 58 rushing yards for Longhorns. So again, that's 2 games that we've just mentioned out of the 3 in their most recent losses under 70 yards rushing. Then you go against Georgia, I believe in the SEC championship game here. Texas only tallied 31 rushing yards. Then you go back to the prior game against Georgia. Texas only ran for 29 yards. So I'm not going to, beat a dead horse here. But in all of the recent losses, except the season opener, the running game has not been living up to that moment. And again, the Pitbull quote comes into play here because when the going gets tough, the tough get going. The Longhorns have not been a tough team, let's be honest. When they're facing teams with similar athletic potential, they just have not lived up to the billing that I know Kyle Flood expects from his group. And just one last thing in terms of the offensive line before I move on. I got some PFF grades from CJ Vogel, my good friend, who tweeted these out post-Florida. Let me go over them real quick. DJ Campbell was the leading offensive lineman with just under 91 of a PFF grade. Again, if you get near 100, you're doing much better. If you get closer to a 0, you're not doing as solid. Cole Hudson, just under a 71, second leading lineman for Texas. Brandon Baker, 64.1. Trevor Gooseby, 63.9. And then you look at the left guard position. Connor Stroh, just under a 49 at 48.8. In Nick Brooks, I don't even know if this is possible, but he got a 0.0. And overall, I mean, you can look at that left guard position and say, what is going on? I agree. I think Steve Sarkisian and Kyle Flood would also be scratching their head, but it is just troublesome given the fact that I know it's much publicized, but the Longhorns didn't do much in the portal, especially if you look at the offensive line group. I don't think they snatched anyone. They trust the recruiting, and it's either they haven't developed the players or they haven't gotten the high-end caliber players that they need at the SEC level, and that's been really a shining just message these past year or two. And I don't mean to sound, like I'm griping at anything, but if you're a Texas fan and you're, just investing so much in this program, you're expecting more out of Steve Sarkisian's team in year 5. Again, just the offensive line in general has not been solid. And then Arch Manning, he did have some inconsistent plays, which has been the theme for him this season against Florida. And ironically, I'm going to mix this in with a bit of a good and a bad. I know we've been talking about bad. He did throw for 2 interceptions against Florida, but ironically enough, when he was in the crunch time, he played almost looser. Now, in some ways you have to, but you're also having to press when you're down late. And some of his pressing plays, he actually looked looser, finding Ryan Wingo for a big touchdown pass, and also showing off his legs in moments when he needed to. Not necessarily forcing the run, but when the run was open, he was doing a good job of keeping his eyes down the field and then pulling the ball and running as well. Again, being Texas's leading rusher against Florida. So that was a bit of a good. I would probably give Arch against Florida, I'd say a grade of a C plus or a B minus just for accurate framing there. So I'm not saying he was, amazing, but I think if you were to grade every position against Florida, I think you would have a little bit more underwhelming grades. Some passing students just by name, maybe like an Anthony Hill Jr., but overall by position group, I think most have failed their test against the Gators. So I think just Arch coming through is at least a positive sign in such a tough environment. Yet again, he did not play great, but he did keep the team competitive, and that's really all you could ask in just a horrible performance overall from the Longhorns on Saturday. Defense, man, we're talking about physicality. The offensive line, of course, you got to be the more physical group, and Texas's offensive line did not establish that from the get-go. And defense, the same way. You got to win the battle of the trenches just in general. And the Florida Gators stormed down the field on that first drive and found the end zone. And the Texas defense had no answer for them. and we're losing that battle at the line of scrimmage routinely. And that's not something you want to see, of course, from your football team, but also from a team that was ranked number 1 in the preseason, and the strength being entering the season, that defense. And again, against Florida, it almost looked like you could, look at that Florida defense and give them that number 1 preseason ranking in terms of a defense compared to Texas. I mean, they stood their ground. The Longhorns, really all position groups up front, I'm maybe the most disappointed with, just because that they have some of those All-American level players. But then also in the secondary, Dallas Wilson for Florida, the freshman that was making his debut to college football, just torched, and I mean torched, the Longhorns offensively. What do you do if you're Texas? In part, you just need a better pass rush, but overall, you got to be able to stay with guys in the secondary as well. I pointed this out in the preview and in past weeks. I said that Texas has gotten lucky. They haven't played a great quarterback to this point in time, and the QBs that they have played have just missed open throws. I told everyone that Lagway, although he has been struggling this year, is not going to miss some of those easy opportunities that Texas gives him. And you can see Billy Napier really just kind of scheduled plays in a quarterback-friendly manner, especially at the start of the game. Had a lot of play-action passes, quick passes, running the football, making it easy for Lagway, but the Texas secondary was also making it easy for him as well, oftentimes providing receivers at least 10 to 15 yards of cushion at the time of snap, just in their alignment. So not too promising there. And then lastly, before I move on, Dallas Wilson, 6 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns against Texas. DJ Lagway, Florida's quarterback, threw for 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he did have an interception as well. Now moving on, lastly, to the special teams unit. It's hard to be excited about special teams, I think, this year, just because they don't have an explosive playmaker that you can really rely on, again, to take some chances on punts and kickoff returns. And I know in years past, again, I hate, beating a dead horse because I mention this quite often. Silas Bolden in the past, he's got at least 1 screw loose, maybe 2 at punt return. Ryan Niblett, I love you, but he just hasn't shown that he's a little crazy, and you're going to need a little crazy from a punt returner. And Texas just did not do amazing in terms of setting up their offense from the return game, but also in the kicking game. Bomeister, A-plus punter, he got a punt blocked. Really no help in front of him in terms of punt block. His punt was blocked for a safety, and then he had 2 punts that were bound to be inside the 5-yard line, honestly the 1-yard line both times, and Texas just couldn't down them. When you're gift wrapping the other team opportunities like that, and that's not a huge opportunity per se, but from going inside the 1-yard line to now you've got a touchback, that's a big difference. And so all this to say, I did call it a mid-season recap for a reason. The Longhorns have shown us with their play on the field who they are. We've all been talking about the potential of this team, myself included, but with so many games under their belt, it's starting to be the time where we got to rein in those expectations and call what we see. Right now, this is not a great football team. I know before the year I was thinking this could be a championship contending team. Right now, after this past game and they're 3-2, a loss to open SEC play, I don't want to go total knee-jerk reaction here, but maybe it's time to start asking whether Texas will even make a bowl game. And I know that's a big drop-off, but just to get to 8 wins now, you need to win 5 more games in this SEC, and we've already, yet again, dropped the first game in the conference schedule. Oklahoma is going to be a big test for Longhorns. We're going to preview and predict this here shortly on the next video. But again, what did you think about Texas dropping to Florida? Let me know down below. I know it's not a fun game for you guys to think about, but really appreciate you watching. As always, don't forget to have a great rest of your day, and please do check us out at HornSports.com for all the latest in Texas news. Thank you.